onto JavaScript. The first 3 lessons are introductory. You can skim through them if you want to. Lesson number 2 though, objects and object constructors. Do pay attention here, especially to the object part. You see, JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language, so you're gonna wanna deeply understand what an object is, the key and the pair system. And when it comes to constructors, you're gonna see a lot of them, a lot of ways to build them. I'd stick to the basics. Don't go down the rabbit holes. They certainly put a lot of links to them, so just skim through the object constructors if it's getting too long, but definitely pay attention to the object part. There's some links in these lessons, the link to Mozilla, Firefox. I do all the exercises. Remember, practice makes perfect. Now let's go to the first project, that is the library project. Now, as you can see, this is a project that involves creating objects using a constructor. This is what's happening under the hood right now. I'm putting a name for a book, an author, a number of pages, and a status, and it's creating an object with a constructor, and it's pushing it into an even larger object called the library, right? And this project is really interesting. This workflow of creating objects and pushing things into them, it's gonna happen time and time again in the future. So you gotta learn this one. Of course, you can take inspiration from my code. I try to make it as concise as possible. Now let's go with some recommendations, okay? Number 1, use a small CSS framework. Pico CSS allows you to, only using HTML elements, have some decent CSS to your page, right? So all you have to do is copy these HTML elements and put them into your index HTML, and if you link in the top of your HTML to the Pico CSS link, which you can find here, you're gonna have all these different input things, and they already come preset with some beautiful things, like for example, okay, please fill out this field. So you're gonna make your user interface much easier, and you're not gonna waste time with things that are not useful, okay? Tip number 2 is, it's not a tip, but you can see I have favy icons here, which are the little icons here. To do that, you can just download them from the web, and as you can see here, I have the rel icon, and you put the link and it just appears right here. The factory functions and the module pattern is the most important one, by far. So this is where you learn to think like a programmer, right? If I have DOM manipulation things and logic things in the one function, it's just a mess. So what you do is you say, okay, the render logic is going to go in its own function. The game logic is going to go in its own little function. The event handler logic is going to go in its own little module, right? And the project that deals with this is Tic Tac Toe, which I'm going to show it to you right here. So it's just a simple game, play along, but under the hood, what you have is a pretty concise code, and most importantly, you have 4 main blocks. This is what I want you to take from my code and from what I learned, is make 4 immediately invoked function expressions, which you're gonna learn about, and have them each do their own thing. So I had one for render logic, which you can see here. I had one for board logic, right? This is, how to create the board. I had one for game logic, right? If I have X, X, and X, it's a win, so display win, right? Or send the render logic function the command to display win, right? So it's the first project where you really separate into modules and you use the immediately invoked function expressions. One thing I would like to add about the Tic Tac Toe page is Web Dev Simplified. This guy has really good HTML and CSS for the Tic Tac Toe, though I did not like his JavaScript. But you can take inspiration from his, because what he does is he manages to use the CSS to make things that you usually do with JavaScript, right? So I'd pay attention to that. I would take inspiration from him. He has really good programming habits, so you can soak those in. After Tic Tac Toe, you have 3 lessons. They're kind of confusing. Lessons number 6 and 7 don't really matter that much, gotta be honest. I didn't really understand them. Now, lesson number 8. This is a follow along lesson, right? You gotta do what they say you gotta do, right? And you're not gonna understand what you're doing. It's just like setting Git. Remember when we did that in the fundamentals? Well, you're not gonna know what you're gonna be doing, but just follow it. And basically what Webpack is, it's a way to compress a lot of different modules, right? Because as we go in the course, we are separating our code into little modules. It's a way to put it all into one. So to give you an example, let's say we have this index JavaScript file, right? It has a lot of, constants and functions, and let's say we have other JavaScript files, right? What Webpack does, it just mashes them all into one. It looks crazy, but it works. All right, so what I'd also recommend when you start the restaurant page project, let's go into it, is right here you have this instruction, right? This is like your Bible for Webpack. You're gonna be using it a lot, so do make sure to learn this, because it's gonna be like your git push, git add, git commit. You're gonna use it for every project from now on. Okay, make sure you really nail this one. So let me show you my project. It's just a simple page. We have Giga Chef, he eats steak, he loves rare steak. We have some, plates, you can take a look at them. And overall, it's a fun project to do. And the most important takeaway from it is, this. This, as you can see here, there's a lot of more files. It's just getting used to making the... Finally, we get to the latter parts of this module, and it's the OOP principles. This lesson, though important, it's sort of like it's theory, it's not practice, right? So definitely go to the practice links and just skim through the theory. It's pretty confusing, but you're gonna understand about it. It's the thing I was telling you guys about, having different modules. Well, it sort of reinstates that again. Finally, we go to the crown jewel, the project to-do list. This one was a hard one. Let me show it to you guys. So, as you can see, you can make different lists, right? And you can put tasks in them, put dates on them, and voila. Right, you can check them off, you can go back, you can see it checked off here, it's going to be checked off here. This project was the hardest by far, and you're going to take a long time to do it. Again, I recommend before you start this project to do the whole thing, just create a new repository for Web Dev Simplified. Just follow along, and he actually defers the HTML and CSS part to a friend of his. And I would do that as well, because he has a really good habit, as you can see, of using data attributes for JavaScript and using classes and IDs for CSS. And this is something that the Odin project does not tell you about, and it's just a good practice. Separate CSS from JavaScript. Do not use a query selector within class, because then you're going to change the name of the class and your JavaScript is not going to work. So let me show you this in action, right? As you can see, my JavaScript, it selects only data keys, right? And as you can see, my CSS only classes. And when we go to the index HTML, we can see that a lot of the things, we have classes on them, and we also have data key bindings. And the reason for this is we can change our CSS independently from our JavaScript. This is a really big concept I want you to take with you. Another thing you're gonna find useful is, if you haven't done the intermediate HTML, you want to use forms and HTML things in general. Some people have the bad practice of using divs for everything, and you can actually take advantage of HTML. HTML is much more powerful than you think. So if you haven't done the intermediate HTML, please do that first. You're gonna use this especially in the to-do list project. Another tip regarding the to-do list and Webpack in general. So whenever you're trying to test out your JavaScript, you usually use console.log, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, when you have a Webpack running and you want to see what line you messed up, it's only one big huge line and it's not understandable at all. So what I recommend is, see how I have this index.js file in the source, right? In the source. Well, what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually write this in the main. So you're gonna delete all this shit. You're gonna delete this. You're gonna copy. You're gonna do all your project. You're gonna do it in the main.js, right? Where Webpack would download it, all its stuff, right? So you're gonna do it here, and the reason for it is that when you're working on it, you can console log. You can see where your problem is at. There's ways to see your problem using Webpack, but they're more complicated. So whenever you finish your project, you're just gonna copy this and send it back to index.js, right? Send it back to the source. Alright guys, that's it for the fundamentals. Do check the descriptions. There's a link to my projects and links to useful things, alright? Have a good one.